Hi guys, so I'm here today with another book haul since I've managed to acquire another little pile of books to share with you. But without further ado, let's have a look at the books, shall we? So the first two books I picked up in St Pancras train station, and the first one's actually a book I've already read but didn't own my own copy of, and that is the Symposium by Plato. This is the Penguin Great Ideas edition, which I just think is absolutely adorable and such a lovely design. This is a piece of ancient Greek literature. Plato was an ancient Greek philosopher, and this book is all about the topic of love. It's set in a symposium where a group of male friends have gathered, and each of them puts forward a theory on love and what love is and how it functions in society and the god love, etc, etc. Lots of different theories on love, and it's very short, as you can see. I read it years and years and years ago, and although some of it sticks out in my mind, I feel like I don't have the best memory of it as a whole, and I wanted to reread it, so I'm doing that and I'm really enjoying it. From ancient non-fiction to modern non-fiction though, I also picked up The Descent of Man by Grayson. I'd seen this around, but it was Lauren from Reads and Daydreams who reviewed it on her channel that finally made me think, I actually really need to buy that. It sounds fascinating. Grayson is a British artist, and this book is all about society's perceptions of masculinity, the pressure that puts on men and young boys, and how breaking down those masculine stereotypes and expectations, I guess, would make the world a better place for everybody. And it sounds fascinating and super short, so one I'll have to get to really soon. Next up is a book I actually purchased a couple of months ago but don't think I ever showed you in a haul. It must have just got left behind when I was moving around, and this is the Penguin Book of Classical Myths by Jenny March. This is a collection of Greek and Roman myths, classical myths, brought together by Jenny March in, I believe, her own kind of writing style. You know, she's written them down. It says, from the clash of the Titans to the fall of Troy, here are the greatest legends of all time, brilliantly retold by classical scholar Jenny March. So I'm always interested to see how different authors and books tackle the subject of introducing people to classical myths, which myths they choose, how they retell them, how they collect them together, and I just thought it would be interesting to give this version a shot and see how it goes about it. From the sections, it does seem to be the most popular myths that Jenny March has brought together in this book, so we'll see though if that kind of intermingles with some slightly lesser known myths, and I don't know, we'll find out, won't we? This series also, I believe, has a few others in it. So there's an Egyptian myth one, a Norse myth one, I think, and they're all in these beautiful, beautiful covers. The next book was sent to me by the publisher, and it is a classic. It is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a new vintage classics edition, which I just think is absolutely lovely. It's such a nice cover. It's one of the red spines, and I haven't read this book. I definitely attempted to read it years ago, probably when I was a teenager, and remember getting, you know, so far through it but never finishing it. I have seen a film adaptation, so I do know the overarching plot, but it is one of those books that's been on my list to go back to and actually read in full for the longest time. It's about Dorian Gray, a young man who has a painting painted of him, and then some sort of spell, curse, which means that the painting ages and he doesn't. He remains kind of forever young, and he uses this as an opportunity to lead a very indulgent lifestyle. But he must never look on this painting, or he will become as old as the painting is. I'm sure you've all heard of The Picture of Dorian Gray, but I have no excuses anymore. I must finally read it. I picked up the next three books when I was out book shopping with my friend Jill, which always seems to happen. So those are The British Museum is Falling Down by David Lodge, which is a book I'd never heard of before until I saw this cover on a table in Waterson's and thought, what is that? I must know, because obviously it's got the British Museum on the front, which is one of my favourite museums. It has a massive classical ancient section. This book was actually first published in 1965. This edition is published by Vintage, and it's a comical novel following a man writing his PhD thesis. I was like, I need it. You know, it's got a picture of the British Museum on the front. It's about somebody writing their PhD thesis. I need this book. I'm writing my PhD thesis. I actually don't know what the character is studying. It would be incredibly lucky if he was studying classics, but regardless, I think I'm still going to find this a real fun book to read. The first sentence really just already sold it to me, and that was, "The British Museum is falling down is a brilliant comic satire of academia." Perfect. Had to have it. The next book is actually a book that Jill recommended to me, and in fact a few friends actually recommended it to me. Another friend, Annie, recommended it to me, and I've just heard amazing things, so I was like, I'm gonna pick it up. And that is The Testament of Mary by Quinton. Now this is a tiny, tiny novella. I think it's under 100 pages. Oh no, sorry. It's 104 pages, but it's really short. And this one is all about the life of Mary, i.e. Jesus's mother. And it's meant to kind of be a fictionalized version of her reaction to her son suddenly being treated as if he's the son of God, and kind of the rumours spreading with her, I believe, not having really, you know, had a part in that. I don't think she says he's the son of God. So it sounds really interesting, and like I said, I've heard really good things from people whose opinions I really trust. I have also heard people who didn't like it, so I think that's quite a good balance to be going into it with, and I'll be interested to see where I fall. But it sounds really good, and Quinton is an author I've still not read, but now own 2 books by, so we'll need to read them this year. And lastly, for the books I bought, I have Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. This is a non-fiction book about activism. I think it's also about the kind of major events that inspire the political activism over the past few decades. It goes from the fall of the Berlin Wall through the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and lots of other political events that happen in between then and now, and I guess the activism that stirs up in the populations, and I just think that sounds really interesting. It obviously is meant to have a kind of hopeful message. The subtitle is Untold Histories, Wild Possibilities. It says, Hope in the Dark traces a history of activism and social change over the past 5 decades. I think it's meant to be quite an inspiring read. Obviously I wasn't alive in the 80s when some of this stuff happened. I was born in 92, but I do remember going on demonstrations against the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and perhaps there are other instances of political activism in this that I will be able to remember, so that will be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to this one. It's also really short, as have all the books in this haul seem to be. The next book I picked up from my work at Pan Macmillan, and it is another non-fiction book, and sorry if that's really shiny. It says A Good Month for Murder, The Inside Story of a Homicide Squad by Gale, Quinton, Wilbur. Pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? This is a true crime book, I believe, about a collection of detectives trying to catch a serial killer. I've watched a lot of true crime television shows and listened to true crime podcasts, but when I saw this book I realised I've never read a book about a true crime, so I thought it would just be a really interesting thing to read. That's pretty much all I have to say about that one, but looking forward to it. And lastly, I was sent this book by Serpent's Tail. I wasn't expecting it in the post, but it sounded really interesting, so I've kept it around, and that's The Haunting of Henry Twist by Rebecca F. John. This book apparently follows a man whose wife has recently passed away, and he is left alone to care for their baby. And he's dealing with that until suddenly a man comes to his door with the same injuries that killed his wife. I believe Henry Twist is the husband whose wife has recently passed away. So sounds like a good old-fashioned mystery. This one is also set in 1926 in London, so that setting I'm all for. I think I love kind of late 1800s, early 1900s detective stories, and London, as you know, is one of my favourite cities, so looking forward to this one. But lastly, I thought I would mention a book that I actually picked up on my Kindle. I get a lot of my Kindle books from NetGalley, which is a site that you can request books to review in e-format. On top of that, I sometimes download free classics onto my Kindle, but occasionally I will spend the money on a Kindle book, and the book I bought on my Kindle was The Fallen Children by David Owens. This is published by Atom Books, and it is a young adult retelling of The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham, which is one of my favourite classic science fiction books, and I thought the concept of a young adult retelling of that book set in the 21st century was fascinating. I then read the introduction to the book on a Kindle sample where the author talked about how he wanted to use that story to explore the way in which my generation and you know, the generation behind me are in a way being left behind by the state, given how expensive university education is becoming. Don't even know if I'm going to get a state pension at this rate, the lack of jobs, the kind of impossibility of ever buying a house, all of these kind of things. The legacy that young people are being left with in the UK at the moment. And once I read that and knew that it had this political commentary within it, I was all over it. I thought, that's amazing, I am so excited for this. One of my favourite science fiction novels combined with some real contemporary and important issues. Give it to me now, and I haven't been able to put it down since then. I'm about 65% of the way through. It's been 2 days and I'm probably going to finish it tonight. I'm really enjoying it and I'm really intrigued to see where it goes. So really enjoying that one. But those are all of the books I have recently acquired. I hope you have enjoyed this book haul. Do let me know if you have any thoughts on any of the books I've mentioned in this video. I'd also love to hear from you. If you have any recommendations of young adult books with political themes, because I just think they are absolutely fascinating and really important. I'd love to do a video all about politics in YA, what I think that means, why I think that's important, some of the books that I'd read that fit into that category which I would recommend. So if you do have any recommendations for other books I could read, then please do share them with me. But until next time guys, happy reading and I'll see you again soon. Bye!